Hello everyone, and here we are. We are at my favorite books that I read in 2017. So 2017 was a great reading year, perhaps one of my favorite reading years overall on BookTube. I read 103 or 4 books, I forget exactly, and I really enjoyed a large amount of them. It's probably the hardest list to comprise of my favorites in like the 5 years I've been on BookTube. Like, I really struggled, I scrutinized, I didn't include a lot of ones I wanted to include because I really had to pick my ultimate favorites. And if I'm honest with you, I don't have these numbered. Usually I do like a countdown of like 10 to 1 or 15 to 1, however many I have. This year I honestly can't do that. There is not a single book I think that is like my coveted number 1 or my coveted number 5. I'd say probably the last 5 I'm going to show you are probably my favorites of the year, like more I really love those, but overall there's not one particular favorite that was my top read of 2017 because I love all of these. So I obviously love all of these books, and like I said, there's a lot that I left out that I wanted to put on here, but if I would put every single book I love that I read this year, we'd be here forever, and this is probably already going to be a super long video. So I have 15 of my favorite reads that I read this year that I want to share with you. So here we go. Let's start my favorite reads that I read in 2017. Very excited to share with you guys. The first book narrowly made it in. Like, I contemplated this book for such a long time putting on this list, but then ultimately it got on this list because I think about this book a ton, and I know that's means it's one of my favorite books, even if I didn't rate it a full 5 out of 5. If I think about it a ton, it means that it has stuck with me, and that is Side by Noah Schusterman. This was a surprise read for me this year. I read this book on a whim. I was like, I'll just see what it's about. I don't think I'd be super interested in it, but I ended up coming out loving it, and this is just to show you that not all 5-star reads I'm gonna read in the year are going to be on this list. This book got like a 4.5 out of 5 for me, but yet I'm still including it on here because I just thought about it so much. This is basically a book about Side. So we have this world where there's no famine, there's no poverty, there's no really bad things at all, but we have Sides that control the population. They, kill people. They each have their different meaning, they each have their different ways, and basically in this book we follow 2 teenagers that become apprentices to Sides, and it just really delves deeper into there. This is a very thought-provoking book. It's definitely a very surprising book, probably my most surprising read of the whole year. I would highly recommend this book, especially if you're very wary of going into dystopian or the sci-fi elements. This is a great one to jump in with. I cannot gush about it enough. I definitely love this a lot more than I thought I was going to love. The next book I want to talk about is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, a literary fiction book, and this book is really complicated to explain. It's basically about these 2 families that come together, and we really just diversify from there. They each have their own, kind of section where they talk about themselves. Celeste Ng is an amazing author. Her first book, Everything I Never Told You, a few years ago, which also made it on my favorites list, I believe. She just has this way of flowing together all of these different complex characters and flowing them into one direct story, which I love. This is a great book if you want to test the water out. If you want to test the water out with adult fiction, especially literary fiction at that, Celeste Ng just makes you feel all of these feelings. There were so many times I read this book where I was flip-flopping my decision over this one big type of trial thing that was in this book, which I don't want to go into detail about, but I was constantly like, is this the right decision? Is this the right decision? I don't know. Like, my heart kept flip-flopping it either way, but either way, Celeste Ng is a beautiful writer. I love all of her books. This is her second one, and she's quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. Like, this is such a beautifully written book. Like, for the writing alone, this book just gives all the stars. The next books I want to talk about, I'm kind of lumping together because they are within the same genre, and that is chick lit. You guys know I love chick lit. So the first book I want to talk about that's within the chick lit genre that I just adored this year, and that is My Not So Perfect Life by Sophie Kinsella. I love Sophie Kinsella. I read chick lit, I wouldn't say like a ton, but I read it quite often, and Sophie Kinsella hands down is my favorite chick lit author. She really writes those cute stories with her books are so hilarious, and I say time and time again, if you're interested in Sophie Kinsella, listen to the audiobooks. I always listen to her audiobooks. The audiobook is amazing. This is about a woman that is really in her mid-20s, late 20s, I would say, and she's really struggling with what she wants in life. She's struggling with her career, with her love life, and she just doesn't know who she is anymore. And this book is just so hilarious and so great. It doesn't have as much romance in it as her other books do, which I actually really enjoyed a lot more, but it's just so funny. It's so such a coming-of-age story. If you're looking for just a funny, lighthearted book that's gonna make you laugh and smile and have all the romantic swoon eyes, Sophie Kinsella is amazing. This is definitely one of my favorite books books by hers, and I've read pretty much all of them. And the other chick lit one I want to talk about is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This was another surprise read for me. I had heard so many amazing things about this book, and I didn't think I was going to love it, but oh my gosh, this one gets all of the heart eye emojis. Like, it was so swoon-worthy. This is about a man and woman that work together that pretty much are vying for the same job, and they have to compete against one another, and of course you can guess what happens. They fall in love, and it's just so steamy. I'd say this is a great steamy book. It really builds up the steam. It's not like right in your face at the beginning. You really progress with the characters and with their attraction to one another. I just loved it. This is a debut book by this author, and I can't wait to see what other books she writes, because it's gonna be like an auto buy for me from now on. But I'd say these two books don't have the most depth to them, honestly, but they're just such a good time. They made me laugh. They made me smile. I would highly recommend them if you're just looking for a good time, really, honestly. So I love these chick lit books. Would highly recommend them both. The next book that I loved this year was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This was my first Laini Taylor book, and I was very skeptical going into it because if you've heard of Laini Taylor, you just have heard about all the hype. She writes these beautiful books and all of these things, and I was like, oh, what if I don't like it? I loved this book. This is another book that did not get a full 5 out of 5 for me, but was still one of my favorites of the year, strictly because of the writing. One problem I have with this book, it took me a long time to get into, but once I got into it, it was beautiful. This is basically about a lost city of Weep, and these people are trying to find this lost city and to like awaken it again, and that's all I can really tell you about it. You really have to go into this book not knowing anything, because by the end of it you're going to be like, what did I just read? But it's so beautiful. The characters are so rich and vibrant, and the writing is just downright stunning, not to mention the cover. This probably wins all of the cover awards ever, in my opinion, but I love this book, and I definitely want to check out more of Laini Taylor's books just because of her writing, and it's just so beautiful. I just can't get over how stunning her writing is. Next up, I have Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. This book, I was very excited about this book. This is technically book number 6 in the Throne of Glass series, and a lot of people were very skeptical about this book because it follows Chaol's point of view, and I have been a Chaol fan since forever, so I was very excited for it. However, I did not, again, give this book a full 5 out of 5. Very interesting. You're like, what is this top 10? I don't know what this is, but this book was just amazing. Again, for this book, like the previous one I talked about, it took me a while to get into, because if you follow the Throne of Glass world, we're kind of set in this one particular place, and this book takes us to a whole new continent. We had to learn all these new faces and these new structures and places, and I was like, this is a little bit overwhelming, but at the core of this book, it was amazing. It might be one of my favorite books in the whole series overall, and I love the character growth in it. The character growth was amazing. I love the new characters introduced in this. I love the new romances. By the end of this book, I was like, I need more. So if you're skeptical, if you're a Throne of Glass fan, but you're skeptical of this book in particular because of Chaol's point of view, I would highly recommend reading it. I think your perspective of him will change, and if you are a Chaol fan, you're just gonna love him even more. The next book I want to share with you guys is Victus by Ryan Grandin. I read so many fun books this year, and this is one of them. This was such a fun ride. All this crew that boards the Invictus, and they go back and steal things in time and stuff like that. That's all you really need to know about it. It was such a fun book. Perhaps one of the most probably the most fun book I've ever read this year. The crew was just so lively. They all had their each individual traits about them. I love the overall plot. It was fast-paced from the beginning to the end. There was never a time I was bored with it. I just thought this book was just fun. That's the one word I can describe it, was fun. And I would highly recommend it to you if you're a fan of sci-fi, if you're a fan of time travel elements. Definitely, you're gonna love this book. It was just amazing. This book is all about this game called Warcross, and this game is huge. It's a virtual reality game, and everyone who's anyone plays it. We follow a main character who is a hacker, and she hacks her way into this game somehow, and she gets noticed from like the CEO and the creator of the game, and suddenly she's in like the championship games of Warcross, and it goes from there. This was such a vivid setting. Like, I felt I was there. They had so many different worlds in Warcross, and it was like, basically I'd say it's a giant game of capture the flag, and it was so much fun from start to finish. I'd say if you're a fan of video games, you must read this book. If you're a fan of like sci-fi and thrilling things, you must read this book. I loved this book. Definitely one of the most fun books I've ever read this year. That and Victus definitely win all of like the fun awards. Like I had such a good time reading them. Next, I have Illuminae by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This was a book that was previously published, I want to say last year, maybe the year before that, and I just got around to reading it this year. And the reason for that is because I was skeptical. I was like, this is kind of a weird book. This book is different from all your previous books because it's told in mixed media format. So there's never a page where it's just straight up dialogue between the other two. Like there's just told in IMs and dossiers and emails and things like that. This is another sci-fi book. I feel like I said I didn't read a lot of sci-fi. We have a lot of sci-fi on this list. This is about a ship that is in space and they're trying to escape this other ship, and basically it's like a space war. So good. Again, another fun book. I'd say this one has a little bit more of a thrilling aspect to it because there was a lot of times in this book you're like, oh crap, are we going to make it out of this really grim situation? I don't know. Stay tuned to find out more. I love this book. There is a sequel, Gemini, which right here, but I didn't love it as much as the first one. The first one was just amazing. I loved it so much. Another surprising read this year. It's just so much fun and different. I'd say if you want something different to shake things up in your reading routine, I definitely recommend this book because it's got all of the like different aspects of it with the mixed media and things like that. And again, another fun, amazing, thrilling read. The next book I want to gush to you about is Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. This is the second book in the Dark Artifices series. This is her third series overall in the Shadowhunters world, and I loved it. I mean, who's surprised? Nobody's surprised. Everyone loved this book pretty much. It was so amazing, and it's very long. This is the longest book I read this year, and it stuck with me mainly because I've grown with the Shadowhunters as the series progresses. I've read all of the books. I really love, I'd say this is my favorite series by her. I will go ahead and say that in case anyone's interested or want to burst anybody's bubble. But I love the character in this book. I love the romance. I love the politics. This book definitely gets into the politics of the Shadowhunters world. I can't really tell you much more about it because this is like the third series within this one overall broad perspective of another series. So the ending of this book had me shook. Like I was like, what? She went there, so amazing. Then I would like to share with you guys Far from the Tree by Robin Benway. I read this book this month, like literally within the last 2 weeks of the year. So just goes to show you that wait until December 31st to comprise your top favorites of the year because you never know if you're going to read an amazing book right at the end. This book was amazing. I had very high expectations going into it and they were all met. It starts out with a girl that is pregnant and she decides to give her baby up for adoption, and that really cues in her feelings for wanting to find her own birth mother. She knows she's been adopted her whole life, but now since she gave up her own daughter for adoption, she really wants to find her birth mother and learn her story. And within that, she finds that she has 2 siblings that she never knew about. So basically in this book, we have these 3 siblings come together. They all share the same mother and they all learn to bond together. They also decide to go look for their birth mom together, and it was such a heartwarming book. I cannot stress this enough. If you're a fan of like books about families to the core of them, please read this book. This book did not have a ton of romance in it. It was strictly about families, and I love that. If you're a fan of parenthood, I would highly recommend this book. If you're a fan of This Is Us, I would highly recommend this book. It's full of adoption, of foster cares, of just families at the root core of it. So beautifully written. Robin Benway has really become one of my favorite authors. The way she writes is so simplistic yet so beautiful, and this book is just that. Next up, I want to talk about 2 of my favorite sequels, probably my 2 favorite sequels I read this entire year. The first one of that being One Dark Throne by Kendara Blake. This is the second book within the 3 Dark Crowns series, and this one did not disappoint. I loved it even more than I loved the first one. So good. In this world, because I can't tell you what this book is particular about because it would be spoiling for you obviously, in this world we follow 3 sisters, and in each generation these triplets are born, and they're separated pretty much a little bit after they are born, and they each go to these different islands, and they each have different powers. One can ingest poison without having any problems at all. Another one can really be connected with nature, have animals as familiars, and the other sister can really focus on the elements, and she can bring like lightning and thunder and all that kind of stuff. stuff. And in this world, we have these sisters that really hone in on their powers, and at the age of 16, they all get together, and it's pretty much like a fight to the death, and whoever is left standing will be the new queen. And this one even expands more on it. We learn more about the sisters, more things you get to learn about in this world. I love how this is a matriarchal world where the women are in power, which was amazing to read about. Second book was so good. I cannot wait to see what's gonna happen in this series. Like, every time I read a book by her, I'm like, what's gonna happen next? And it's insane. And the other sequel I want to talk about is Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. This is the second book in the Monsters of Verity series, and the first book, This Savage Song, I read last year, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. So when it came time to read this one, I was like, I'll like it, whatever. I freaking loved this book. I was not expecting to like it whatsoever, but I cannot stress how much I love it. And I'm the unpopular opinion. A lot of people prefer the first book over the second one. I cannot gush enough about the second book. We're set in this world where there are monsters, and there are 3 different types of monsters. Monsters are bred from violence, and we have this world, we have the city of Verity, and it's very much torn between like the monster side and the other side, and we follow these 2 main characters. One in particular is a monster who he steals souls by playing his violin. He wants to be very much like a human. And then we have another main character who is a human that desperately wants to be like a monster, very, very brutal. And they come together, obviously, and things happen. That's all you need to know about it. Victoria Schwab, her writing is just stunning. Like her, I'd say, and Maggie Stiefvater are like my favorite authors strictly for their writing style. I can't get over it. If you're looking for a dark, rich, gritty fantasy book, I would highly recommend this series. Such a good series. Not a lot of romance either, in case you're looking for that as well. I love this book. I was so surprised of how much I loved it. The next book I loved it so much, is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. Oh my gosh. This book, again, did not get a full 5 out of 5 from me. Here it is sitting number 2 on my list. And that is because, again, another fun book. I cannot get over how many fun books I read this year. This book is literally villains versus heroes. So this world where we have the supervillains trying to regain power, we have these heroes called Renegades trying to, defeat them. This was such a fun book. The one qualm I have with it, I'll say time and time again, is I don't think it needs to be this long. It's rather lengthy, around 500 pages. I feel like it could have been chopped in half, honestly. But overall, this was such a fun read. If you're a fan of Marvel, you need to read this book. If you're a fan of just any superhero show or comics or just the whole notion of superheroes and villains, this is a definite must read. The are so fun to read about. The powers are also fun to read about. Some of them are kind of really obscure with their powers, and some of them have really interesting ones. Overall, I love this book. Again, didn't think I was gonna love it as much as I did, but I ended up coming out like stunned of how much I loved it. And here we are at my favorite book of the whole year. And surprise, surprise, it's not a single book. It is a trilogy. I know I'm only holding up 2 books, but the first one is being lent out. Sorry. And that is A Darker Shade of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. I feel like this has been a lot of people's number ones, and with good reason. So Darker Shade of Magic, which is right here, like I said, it's being lent out by a friend, I finally read this year after being on my shelf for 2 years. I don't know why I waited this long, because I love V.E. Schwab's writing. I read Darker Shade of Magic and fell in love with it, and I beat myself up, quite honestly, because I was like, why did I wait so long to read this book? And then after that, it was literally a binge fest. We have our first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, which is probably my favorite in the series, honestly. We have Gathering of Shadows, the second book in the series, which is probably my least favorite book. Then we have A Conjuring of Light, which is the third book in the series, and amazing. This probably really ties close to the first book. This is such a rich fantasy series. In this world, we follow our main character, Kel. He is a person that can transport to different Londons, and in this series, we have different Londons. We have Red London, which he hails from, which like magic is abundant and flowing really good. There's Black London, which nobody talks about. It's kind of fell extinct. There's White London, which their magic has been extinct a lot and it's kind of dying. And we also have Grey London, which is pretty much our London, just regular London. And basically Kel goes to these different Londons to be deliver messages and stuff like that, and then he gets caught up in trouble and things happen from there. This was so amazing. The characters are amazing. The world is amazing. The magic is amazing. The writing is stunning. I'd say if you're really interested in dipping in your toe into the adult fantasy world, which I am very, very much new to, I would highly recommend A Darker Shade of Magic trilogy. So worth it. So beautiful. Can't gush about it. This one's my #1 spot simply because I read all 3 books this year and loved all of them. The second one I said I don't love as much, but it was good. So amazing. Such a great fantasy series. And by the end of it, you're going to be so sad it's over. Like, you're going to be like, why? Why is this over? But it was such an amazing ride. So there you have it. Those are my favorite reads of 2017. So looking back on this list, I love all of these books for each individual reasons, and they're all so amazing. Just can't get over how much I love them. So I am so happy with my list this year. There's a lot I left out, like I said, but I just love all the ones I talked about. If you have any of the same favorites as me, let me know down in the comments. Also, let me know what were some of your favorite books of the year, or what was your one favorite book that you just loved above all else. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to this channel. Also give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And I will see you guys very soon with some new videos. Bye.